Welcome to The Point. This is a series on the human body, the miraculous human body, and today we're going to be talking about the miraculous circulatory system. We have in another program talked about the human blood, which is specialized, but we're going to talk about the actual mechanism of getting the blood around the body. In other words, the pumping system, and we call it the circulatory system. So I just want to show you a picture of what the circulatory system actually looks like. There we are, the circulatory system. That's what we're going to be talking about for the next 27 minutes. I'd just like to say that we do love to have feedback about these programs, so if you've got any comments, please send us an email to info@revelationtv.com. Any questions you've got, I'll try and answer them all personally. That's info@revelationtv.com. I also have a website called freechristianteaching.org, and all of these programs are you can watch them online free. You can also order free DVDs anywhere in the world. They come from TLB, which is an organization in Swindon in the UK, and they will send them to you. Right. So we're going to talk about the human circulatory system, and the whole point of the circulatory system is to get the blood pumping around the body, because blood is a liquid organ, and the total length of your circulatory system is 60,000 miles. I'm going to say that again, 60,000 miles. That's twice the distance around the Earth. Now, the average adult has 9 to 10 pints of blood in his or her body. And these are what the red blood cells actually look like. They're like little red saucers, little platelets, little plates, I should say. They're not platelets, they're plates. They're flat, and they're very squashy because they have to fit through little tiny capillaries. Those little tiny capillaries, you could put 10 of them together, and 10 of them together would be the thickness of one human hair. Now, we make about 100 billion red blood cells every day, and about 2 million red blood cells every second. Can you imagine that? 2 million red blood cells every second. And that there, what you can see there, is a capillary with a blood cell going through it, and they can only travel in single file. Now, here we're going to look at the heart, and we're looking particularly at the aorta. That's the big vessel that comes out of the heart. It's about the size of a garden hose. The capillaries, on the other hand, as I said, they're so small that 10 of them are the thickness of one human hair. And the 9 or 10 pints of blood circulate through the body 3 times every minute. So it's not a static thing. It's going whishing around the body at a massive speed. So in one day, the blood travels 12,000 miles. 12,000 miles, that's the same distance as London to New Zealand. In one day, your blood travels 12,000 miles, London to New Zealand. And that's all done by your heart. Your heart beats 100,000 times in one day, or about 40 million times a year. 40 million times a year. And it's a very, very powerful pump. Here's a sort of silly little picture, really. It's an image of somebody picking up a ton weight. In 1 hour, the heart works hard enough to produce enough energy to raise almost 1 ton of weight 1 yard from the ground. So it's a very powerful very, very powerful heart. The heart beats around 3 billion times in the average person's lifetime. Now, we're trying to get blood round, so let's look at a droplet of blood and see what it's actually got in it. Within a tiny droplet of blood, there are 5 million red blood cells, 300,000 platelets, and 10,000 white cells. It takes about 1 minute for a red blood cell to circulate the whole body. Just think about it. One single cell, 1 minute, it goes around the whole body. Red blood cells make approximately 250 round trips of the body before going back to the bone marrow, because they're made in the bone marrow, where they were born to die. And red blood cells may live for about 4 months, circulating through the body, feeding the 100 trillion body cells. About 2 million blood cells die in the human body every second, and the same number are born every single second. So the function of the circulatory system is to carry oxygen to all the cells that compose the body, of which you have 100 trillion. It delivers all the oxygen and glucose and all the other things that the body needs. It acts as a delivery system, not just for the nutrients, but also for the hormones and all the other biological components to the specific target organs. It collects metabolic waste. You see, our bodies produce carbon dioxide, amongst other things, and that's toxic. So it collects all this waste and takes it to our lungs, and we breathe it out because it's acid and we need to get rid of it. It plays a critical protective role in combating infections, because in our blood we've got lots of white cells, and whenever they are invading pathogens like bacteria, fungi, viruses, it destroys most of them. You don't actually often get ill. I know we do get ill, but most of the time we don't get ill. So the white cells are part of the immune system, and I will be doing a program about the immune system. Now, what the blood circulatory system is actually doing is transporting oxygen and all the nutrients to the muscles so they can take part in a really complicated reaction called the Krebs cycle. I'm just going to show you a picture of the Krebs cycle. I'm not even going to begin to try and explain it here, because this is going to take one whole program to explain. But let me explain to you very simply, the whole purpose of the Krebs cycle is to make energy in the cell, in the mitochondria of the cell. There's a molecule within the cell called ADP, adenosine diphosphate, and using oxygen, that is made into a high-energy cell called ATP, or adenosine triose phosphate. And the way that your muscles contract, for example, your heart contracts, your muscles contract, and even how your everything works in your brain and your eyes and everywhere else, is this high-energy molecule, ATP. It's like a coiled-up spring, and it releases energy as it goes back to ADP again. So that's what the whole purpose of the blood system is to get the energy, the oxygen, to the cells so that the Krebs cycle can work. And we're going to briefly talk about photosynthesis, because we are very dependent on the plants, and the plants are very dependent on us. You may think it's strange to talk about photosynthesis, which is all about plants, when we're talking about the circulatory system. Well, I want to explain to you why that's so important, is because the plants manufacture our oxygen and our sugar for us, and we desperately need oxygen and sugar. Now, the plants do something else for us. They take away our toxic carbon dioxide and metabolize that, get rid of it, and make it into carbon, because amongst other things, we have a lot of carbon in it. What they do is actually fix carbon. So we are very, very dependent on the plants, and the plants are equally dependent on us. So when you're looking at a plant, we're going to have a whole program on plants, in fact, lots of programs on plants. You're looking at your friends, because they are chemical factories making oxygen and sugar for you. And they are they are as important to your cells as your heart is. Because if it wasn't for the plants, there wouldn't be any oxygen and sugar to deliver to your cells. Right. We're going to talk now about a little bit about the transport system, because you've got lots of organs in your body, and over the various programs I'll be talking about these organs. But all of these different organs, I'm not even going to go through them right now, but they require required all these different nutrients, oxygen and glucose and all these other bits and pieces, in order to function. And that's the purpose of this pump. The circulatory system is to get all the oxygen and the nutrients to all the different organs in the body. And the heart itself is a very complex machine. Here's what the heart looks like, and it actually needs blood. It actually needs oxygen itself, and that's why you've got coronary arteries. You've probably heard of coronary arteries. Well, coronary arteries, what do? They provide oxygen for the actual muscle of the heart itself. And one of the common causes of death is coronary artery disease, so that the heart doesn't get enough oxygen and dies. That's basically what a heart attack is. Now, the heart is basically a very complicated pump. So before we get more into pumps, I want to talk about a pump which you're familiar with before talking about the heart. And I want to talk about a house. Now, you might not live in a house, you might live in an apartment. Now, it depends on where you live. I live in the UK, and in the UK we mostly have a central heating system. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about central heating system. One of the important components of a central heating system is a pump, a central heating pump. And it's a very important part of the central heating system because it pumps all the water around the radiators. There's another part of the central heating system. It's called a motorized valve, and they actually go off, and well, in my house they go wrong about once every 9 months. I don't know about you, but I find that central heating systems are very fragile systems. What I'm about to tell you is that the human circulatory system is far, far more complex than the central heating system in your house, if you happen to live in UK or a colder climate. If you live in a warm climate, you probably haven't got a central heating system. Now, here's my question, is that if you were building a house, and you said to the builder, right, I want you to build the roof, the walls, the front door, the windows, and everything else, how likely do you think it is that all that pump and radiators and the tank in the loft and all the pipes and everything else would all just sort of all happen by chance? How likely do you think that is? Well, I don't think it's very likely. Well, actually, the evolutionists want us to believe that all this circulatory system happened by chance, by evolution. Well, I'll be honest with you, I think they're wrong, because it is very, very complicated, as I want to show you. Right, here is, this is a model of a heart. When you go to medical school, you get presented lots of models like this of different organs, and this is a model of a heart. I'm not going to go into all the details of it too much. It's got 3 layers called the endocardium, the myocardium, and the pericardium. And when you're at rest, you propel the blood around the body about 5 litres per minute. You know what 5 litres looks like? One of those big bottles you get in the supermarket. 1 litre per minute goes around the body. So the circulatory system relies on an estimated 60,000 miles of vessels, and the heart is actually more or less in the middle of your chest, and it's about the size of a clenched fist. That's how big your heart is, about the size of a clenched fist, and it's about here, all right? It weighs about 320 grams in men and 250 grams in women. And in 1 year, it contracts 42 million times roughly and ejects 700,000 gallons of blood. Now, it's not like, the heart is not like your central heating system. It's actually a much more complex system than that, because it's a dual system. So I want to show you what the heart and the lungs look like. The heart and the lungs, you see the blue element on there is deoxygenated blood. That's why the blood in your veins looks blue. It comes into the right side of your heart and then is pumped into your lungs, where it gets filled up with oxygen. Then it goes into your left part of your lung and then gets pumped to the rest of your body. I'm not going to go into all the details. The details actually don't matter. But the point is, it's a dual system, which makes it even more complex for this to all have evolved by chance. what I would like to say is this. This has all got to happen as soon as any living organism arises. Now, I believe in creation. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And it says in Genesis 2, verse 7, it says, "And the Lord God formed man of the dust of the ground and breathed into him the spirit of life, and man became a living being." So I believe we're talking about a creation, that the human body is something created by God, in the image of God. However, that's not what is generally taught in schools and universities. What they want you to believe is that this whole circulatory system arose by chance. So I've got some questions. The lungs, in order for a circulatory system to arise by chance, various things have got to happen, and you haven't got millions of years for it to happen. It's got to happen instantly and get it right instantly. And here are the things that have got to happen. These are just some of the things, by the way. The lungs have got to be there that can enrich the blood with oxygen. The hemoglobin's got to be there to bind with oxygen, and hemoglobin is one of the most complex molecules ever discovered. The red blood cells have got to be there to carry the hemoglobin to the cells throughout the body. The 60,000 miles of blood vessels have got to be there to transport the red blood cells to the tissues. The heart has got to be there, this complex pump, to take all that material throughout the body. And that's all got to be there right from the beginning. There's no room for any error, because you'll have a dead body instantly. Your brain, you'll be unconscious after 10 seconds if your brain doesn't receive oxygen. I'm not going to suggest it, but if somebody is strangled, they're unconscious within 10 seconds, because your brain, you're unconscious within seconds. Within 4 minutes, you're brain dead. So evolution has got 10 seconds to get it right, and within four minutes, the organism is literally brain dead. We have a very complicated electrical system in the heart called a bundle of His. It's a very complicated system. There are various specialized cells that conduct electrical impulses throughout the heart. They originate in what's called the sinoatrial node, and they travel to the what's called the atrioventricular node, and then pass down the septum of the heart to the rest of the heart. I don't need to explain the details. I'd like to show you what an ECG looks like. You've probably heard of an ECG, and some of you might have even had an ECG. There you have what's a typical ECG, which is a PQRST complex. Just out of interest, the P on the left there is simply the atria contracting. The QRS complex in the middle there, that's the electrical activity over the ventricles and the beginning of the contraction. And then the last little bit, the T wave, coincides with the recovery part of the ventricles, the electrical recovery. This is all electrical. Now, when you go to the doctors, they listen to your heart with a listening machine called a stethoscope. I'm sure you've seen doctors carrying those around. Well, they're listening for lubs and dubs. And basically, without going to any technical detail at all, what they're listening to is your heart valves opening and shutting. I'm not even going to bother to explain which valves they're listening to, because it doesn't really matter. What they're listening to is your tricuspid and mitral valves, and they have particular sounds. When I did medicine for 5 years, and you were taught to identify and hear exactly what those valves sound like as they close. Now, the blood vessels themselves are the arteries, the veins, and the capillaries. Now, they don't actually all look the same. The arteries have got lots of blood vessels in them because the arteries have a function. They need to contract. They need to contract, particularly if you cut yourself. They need to contract so that you don't bleed to death. There are lots of other ways you don't bleed to death, but the blood vessels have got lots of muscles in them. On the left there, that one looks quite thick because it's got lots of muscles in them. The veins, on the other hand, are quite thin, but they've got lots of little valves in them. Very important, because the blood from say the limbs comes up the leg, and it does so because the blood is squashed using what's called a muscular pump up the veins, up the leg, and into the heart, using all these valves. Now, I want to move on to a little bit more about what the Bible actually says about our heart. And the answer is the Bible doesn't say very much about our heart at all, because God is actually much more concerned about our spiritual condition than our physical hearts. Of course God is concerned about our hearts. He's given us hearts that work fantastically well for most of us of 70 or 80 years. But Jesus spoke frequently about our hearts, but he wasn't talking about our physical hearts. What was he talking about? He was talking about our spiritual hearts, which is different from our physical hearts. Now, I'm having difficulty explaining to you exactly what a spiritual heart is, so I thought the simplest thing is to tell you what Jesus actually said about our spiritual hearts, and you'll get the idea. Okay, here we go. I'm going to just say a few scriptures to you. Matthew 22, verse 37, you shall love the Lord with all your God, with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. Now, quite clearly, Jesus is not speaking here about your physical heart in your chest. He's talking about all of your being, your emotion. The Greek word here is your cardia. There are other places in the New Testament it's used. Matthew 5, verse 8, blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the pure in heart. That's not talking about the muscular organ in your chest. It's talking about the spiritual part of your being, your spiritual heart. Matthew 5, verse 28, whoever looks at a woman to lust for her has already committed adultery with her in his heart, his spiritual heart. Matthew 6, verse 21, for where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Matthew 12, verse 35, a good man out of the good treasure of his heart brings forth good things. Matthew 18, verse 35, if each of you from the heart does not forgive his brother his trespasses, and so it goes on. But he's talking about your spiritual heart. Mark 7, verse 6, this people honors me with their lips, but their heart is far from me. Again, Jesus is not talking about their physical hearts, but their spiritual being is far from me. And lastly, there are a lot more examples, but I've just chosen a few. Mark 11, verse 23. He who does not doubt in his heart, but believes that those things he says will be done, he will have whatever he says. So it's very important to look after not only our physical heart by living sensibly, making sure that we have blood pressure, it's treated properly, by eating the right things, not eating junk foods, keeping our cholesterol down, not getting too overweight, try not to become a type 2 diabetic because we're overweight, and all these other things which are really important for our blood vessels. But Jesus said there's something more important than that, because we are eternal beings. Jesus said, blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see the kingdom of God. He does want us to be physically fit, but much more important, he wants us to be spiritually fit. He wants us to look after our bodies, but to look after our spirits as well. Now, I used to run marathons. I used to be quite fit. Nowadays, unfortunately, I can hardly walk because I've had a nasty car accident. But God is actually more concerned about my spiritual being than my physical being. He has, to a degree, helped me with my physical being, but God is actually concerned with my spiritual being and yours as well. And we need to look after our spiritual being even more than we look after our physical being. We mostly spend, for example, we've fairly recently seen the Olympics, which is all about our physical being. Of course, God is concerned about our physical being, but he's very, very concerned about our spiritual being. So if you've got the choice, and you can only do one, look after your spiritual being. That's more important than your physical being. All right? But ideally, look after both. Ideally, look after both. That's the ideal world. Now, this is a set of programs on the human body That's what this is, a set of programs on the human body. There's a whole series of subjects we're going through. My main point is that the whole human body is supernatural. That is my point. The whole body is supernatural, creating the image of God. You can go onto our website, which is freechristianteaching.org, and see a lot of teaching on this subject and many other similar subjects. And basically, the underlying message is all the same, is that we are basically supernatural. Everything you look at in our bodies, everything I've said today, you can check up in textbooks on the internet. But it's more important to look after our spiritual hearts than it is to look after our physical hearts. We do love to have feedback from you, so please, if you have any feedback and would like to make any comments, please write to us at info@revelationtv.com. That's info@revelationtv.com. Good comments, bad comments, whatever you like us to talk about. Any questions, please write to us at info@revelationtv.com. I'm very keen on Revelation TV. I hope you're keen on Revelation TV, and please join us again on To The Point. Thank you, and it's so lovely for you to join us. And we hope you find that these programs helpful. We're going through the whole body. God bless you. Bye-bye.